Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing and Freedom Journey. Mark DeJesus here. I am your brother from another mother, the tour guide along the way. I'm all about mental, emotional, and relationship health. If you are too, you've arrived at a great place. It's an honor to be able to share with you my passion for mental, emotional, and relationship health. And today I want to get into the topic of spiritual warfare and mental health. I often talk about the spiritual battles that we're facing. Of course, there are certainly spiritual aspects of the battle that we face when it comes to our mental health. But a lot of times when we combine these two subjects, our pathways of application can get really goofy, unproductive, unhelpful, and just not really aligned with fruitfulness in people's lives. So what I want to do here in my discussion and sharing is I want to share with you 10 spiritual warfare reminders that I have in my life that I apply for my mental health that have been very near and dear to my heart over the years and over the journey, and I want to share them with you. Of course, we are facing a spiritual battle as believers. It impacts us in a variety of ways. There's battles waging spiritually over nations, people groups, cities, towns, states, churches, and families. Then there's the battles that you face personally. And I think that we can all understand from a basic standpoint that there's a battle going on over the thoughts that circulate into our belief systems and our perspectives. But many times when we talk about applying our spiritual warfare battles, it can get all over the place. We can get into shadow boxing. We can get so mystical it loses its fruitful application. Do you find that sometimes some of your spiritual warfare, what you'll call spiritual warfare perspectives and applications, can sometimes lead to just more confusion and more just cycling in certain patterns? Well, I'm praying today that what I share with you could help ground you a bit, because what we're needing in our spiritual battles is we're needing to learn how to ground ourselves, to get our root system deeper and stronger, to mature as we heal, and having our spiritual senses developed for greater effectiveness. So I want to get into that and sharing these 10 things. I've learned these over the years. Some of it I've learned the hard way. Some of it I've learned through having an emphasis in areas that weren't helpful and I've been exposed to many deliverance ministries. And I, in fact, did a live broadcast just a few days ago about dysfunction that takes place in deliverance. I am looking at doing a part 2 of that since there was some great feedback in what people were learning. So I want to give you some very, very grounded things that I want to emphasize to you. These are important in my life, in my journey. The first one, it's right at the top of the list and understanding, is when it comes to spiritual warfare, the battle is relational. What do I mean by this? The battle that takes place over our lives, the things that you get hit with in your thoughts and your emotions and your struggles, circumstances you end up finding yourself in, and things that you're going through, they are hitting and targeting primarily your relational bandwidth, meaning how you relate to God, how you see and relate to yourself, and how you relate to others and the world around you. Now, many times Christians can make spiritual warfare so mystical, so out there, so I'm seeking God and I'm spiritually warfaring and all these things, that they often lose track of what spiritual warfare and fighting the good fight is meant to do. Fighting the good fight is meant to actually enhance how we relate to God, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to other people. Because that's where the battle wages. The battle wages in those 3 relational areas. So if you sit down and examine the spiritual battles in someone's life, what you're going to see is you're going to see a whole list of relational experiences, how they think. Now, I'm not talking about these individual micro thoughts that pass in and out. Many people that are a part of my tribe and listen to my materials, they're very obsessive compulsive. So any thought that shows up, they hyperventilate. The devil's giving me a thought. And when I'm talking about thoughts, I'm talking about overall patterns of thinking and how you relate to God. Is he a good God who loves you? Is he a good father who's with you? Is there grace towards you? Is he building faith, hope, and love in your life, or is he distant? Is he angry? Is he constantly punishing you? It's all relational. How do you see yourself? You super hard on yourself, perfectionistic, put a constant stress upon yourself? Is there a lot of confusion in who you are? Is there a lot of confusion in what thoughts you should pay attention to? This is where the battle is. What about other people around you? Woo, that's where it really shows up, right? And how we relate to others, the pain that we've experienced in our life. So when you sit down with someone and you see the pain that they've processed or not processed, their emptiness, the neglect, the trauma in their lives, you're going to see the spiritual battles that this person faces. That's why I talk about many root areas in our spiritual battles. For example, like a rejection root, because it reveals the disconnect we have in relating to God and then how we relate to other people. The self battles that go on in our lives that disconnect us for love, which is brought out in my God loves me, I love myself material to unlock this battle that we have towards ourselves that we've just accepted, and we've become an enemy to ourselves. These spiritual battles, they target our marriages, they target our families, they target our friendships. Why? Because those areas, when they get hit, they impact how we think. Because if your mom and dad's marriage gets hit and they don't know how to relate to each other, that impacts their parenting and how you're raised, how you develop, how you see things. Because that's what we're needing. When we look at the battles in society, what we're needing a father's heart, who's God our Father, to show up in fathers and mothers to help heal the land, because how we think has been impacted relationally. And I don't want us to lose sight of that, because relational interaction actually heals and enhances our mental health. It was meant to do that. Relationship was intended to be a mental health guard in my life. It was also meant to help enhance my mental health. It's also the area that gets attacked, because if we follow the trail of how you relate to your thoughts and how you relate to just life in general, what we're going to tap into is a pathway that leads back to the emptiness, pain, the traumas and dramas of upbringing and in life that hit against you, impacting how you think. So these battles seek to create disconnection. The spiritual battles that you face, there is a goal to create disconnection. So you don't sense God's connected work in your life. You become disconnected from yourself. Some dissociate, some get disconnected from even in their own thoughts and being able to connect to themselves, and also disconnecting from other people in your life. And so I asked myself this question: what does the relational journey look like for me as I'm healing and growing, and how I relate to God, how I relate to myself, how I relate to other people? Now, if we're going to realize the spiritual battle is relational, then I got to realize it's not about fixing my brain. We get lost in that, especially in today's modern age and nutrition, and we get focused on chemical balances or imbalances and certain supplements or medication or just trying to study the brain. I get it. I understand that. I find myself in that a bunch myself. But we lose sight of the greatest mental health healing aid is relationship, and relationship flows out of the heart. And so if you want to enhance your mental health and you want to break through battles, you're going to have to learn how to connect to the heart. Well, Mark, how do I do that? Well, it's relational. We're going to have to, if I'm talking to you, we're going to have to grow together how you relate to God. I'll have to help you to see. You'll have to learn yourself ways that you see God and you see your journey that have become distorted or have been hijacked or become counterfeit. And that can lead into many areas. So it engages us into a healing journey that we can embrace. If this has been a blessing so far in your life and in your journey, would you do me a favor? Click that like button, click the subscribe button, and you can support these broadcasts by going to markdejesus.com and clicking on the donate button. That helps as well too. We greatly appreciate it. Okay, so that's the first one. The first area. I want to get into the second area here. The first one being the battle that you're facing. It's relational. God, yourself, and the world around you. Where do you see that the most? Which of those three? The second, these are things I remind myself on a daily basis. I'm going to share with you the two most powerful spiritual warfare tools in your arsenal. And some of you might say, well, is it repentance? Is it casting out? Is it taking authority over the enemy? And all those things, they can have their place. But love and humility are the two greatest spiritual warfare tools. And I'm going to prove this to you in just a moment. Now, the first one here, humility. We talk about humility. We're talking about, am I teachable? Do I have a posture where I'm not trying to see myself as better than anyone? I'm not in that thing. And I've bent the knee to be taught, to be shown what I need to show, not in being beat up, not in being accused, but for learning. And I'll be honest, this was big for me because my humility process actually came out of really feeling like I don't know what to do. I know that feeling of like, I don't know what to do next. I cannot make sense of my life. In fact, my battlegrounds were humiliating. And many of you that struggle maybe with intrusive thoughts, or you struggle with certain anxieties and things, you struggle with certain thought patterns. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. Sometimes you even share it and you just feel stupid, right? And I allowed that feeling to wash through in the sense of, hey, what have I got to lose here? God, I'm willing to be teachable and I'm willing to learn what I need to learn, because in mental health, we have a lot of defense mechanisms. We have a lot of stubbornness. We have a lot of ways of thinking that are not helpful. They're not healthy, not even biblical, but they can become almost sacred cows. They kind of block the way of us being able to see the truth that sets us free. So humility is an incredibly powerful, and when people talk about spiritual warfare, they talk about all these tools and tactics and things, and I get all that. But really, when we talk about biblical spiritual warfare understanding, we need to talk about humility. Peter says this in 1 Peter 5. I've got it up here on the screen. And he talks about submitting yourselves, because when you're humble, you're submitted to truth. You're submitted. You have a submitted heart to people. Right? He says, likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another. So there's a posture of having a heart of humility towards other people. It means I can hear and receive from you, and my defense mechanisms are not constantly fighting back, and I'm not in this constant self-protective mode. I'm letting my guard down to people. And again, it's not just everyone in the whole world that you're opening up your life to, but there are people that have room to speak into it. Let all of you be submissive to one another, be clothed with humility. So God calls this a garment, something that we're wearing. Humility, just so you understand, is not beating yourself up. That's false humility. That's fake humility. It's not putting yourself down. It's not never looking at yourself. It is having a heart that is postured to learn, to be teachable, to let the process open up of what's needed in your life and journey. Because it says here in context, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So when there's absolute stubbornness in our life, there's a resistance taking place in the heavens, and I don't want that. I want God's grace in my life. And so a quick pathway to grace is humility. And humility has a sense of gratitude in it. And gratitude connects to grace. But God, I thank you that you're here, and I welcome the learning and the growth that's needed in my life. I'm willing to learn what I need to learn. I'm willing to go through what I need to go through to learn what's needed to practice in my life. Okay, so in this humility, he says, therefore, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. He's going to exalt you in due time. That's really powerful right there. Casting all your care upon him, there's your anxieties, for he cares for you. That's connecting to his love. Okay, I'm going to talk about love in just a second. Remember I said humility and love. So his care is within this. He cares for you, but there's a war over you connecting to his care, isn't it? That's where a lot of the battle is, over the goodness and love of God. So in this, he says, be sober. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him steadfast in the faith, because the battleground is wearing down your faith, that you just get worn down, you just give up. And for most of us, the word over your life in your spiritual battle is just stay in the game. Just keep showing up, because there's an aspect of your faith that's being ward over. Hang in there because you're going to learn some things and strengthen your faith. He says, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood all over the world. It's interesting how in our battles, what's one of the things that you think? I'm all alone. No one understands me. What's the point? Right? And he's like, don't think you're the only one going through this battle. You're not. No one has an exclusive battle to themselves. And many, try to take a prize that they're the worst of the worst in their battles. I know I've had my share of that. And he says here, may the God of all grace, who called us to his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after you've suffered a while, there's things that we go through. There's battles that we go through. There's some things that God, and I did a whole broadcast just on this passage. You can go check that. And that God, as his process, he's going to perfect us, establish us, strengthen us. He's going to settle us. That's what he's doing in my life. That's what he's doing in my mental health. He's perfecting, he's establishing, he's strengthening, and he's settling. And to him is going to be the glory in all this, right? But there's a humility process that takes place in this. I've got to learn to humble myself. Now, in James, he says a similar thing. He says, therefore, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. In the previous verse here in verse 6, he gives more grace. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble, right? So part of learning to live in humility and practice submission means I allow myself to come into the learning process of the battle. When I submit myself, I'm allowing to put myself underneath the teaching and learning that's taking place, right? So if I submit myself to someone who's teaching, then I sit under their feedback and under learning from them, right? And God's saying, I want you to do this with me. Let the learning process open up. Submit to God, resist the devil, he will flee. We often, jump to the resist the devil. What are we talking about when we're resisting the devil? The biggest thing that we're resisting is the attack that gets hit on our faith to just not stay in the game. That's really what you're resisting. Just hang in there. Now, James here goes into other stuff about cleansing your hands, you sinners. In the beginning of this chapter, James is talking about wars that they're having. And he's like, you covet and you murder. It's a wild west that James is addressing here. You're gonna write a letter to believers and go, you're murdering and coveting, you have and you don't have. You're asking, you don't have. He's having to. So he says, cleanse your hands because they have been in actual physical battles over the spiritual battles that are waging over them. And he talks about double-mindedness and some other things there. I don't want to get off track. Humility being the key, because in humility, I'm able to hear and learn what I need to hear and learn. So let me go over to 1 John, because let's talk about the power of love, humility and love. And I'll start in verse number 17 of 1 John 4, okay? The battle most of your battles that you have in your life are over the love of God and the grace of God having the work that's needed to work in your life to develop healing, maturity, and overcoming. He says, love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Most believers are scared of the idea of judgment or standing before God. They're in torment. Why? Because they have a fear-based, punishment-based, performance-based relationship with God. So fear has gotten a hold of their hearts. And I know this is one of the first layers I began to recognize. I have a performance-based relationship with God. I'm afraid of him. I avoid him. So now in your mental health, you're struggling because there's disconnect with God. He's not here. He's far away. But John says, man, we can be bold in the day of judgment. We don't have to be afraid. As he is, so are we in this world. There's identity connection there. He says there's no fear in love. So where there is anxiety, there is a need for love to have a deeper work. And that's when it comes to our anxiety, it comes to our obsessions, it comes to our panic attacks, we're needing a combination of learning to fight, but fight from love. Not fight out of striving, fight from love. There is no fear in love. Perfect love, that love of the Father, casts out fear. So now, if somebody has anxiety, we don't need to sit there and scream spiritual warfare at them for hours about their spirit of fear. We just need to disciple them in love. Now, love is a process, and most deliverance ministries don't emphasize process. They emphasize event. They emphasize here and now. They emphasize a miracle moment. And if you don't have that, something's wrong with you. You need to apply 20 more things instead of talking about, here's a journey that we're on, because no one snaps their fingers and all their fears disappear. No one snaps their fingers and all of a sudden they are fully loved by God. No one is fully, perfectly connected to all the love that God has for them. We are on a never-ending journey of learning to be loved, learning to love others, and learning to overcome our fears. This is in our whole journey of life, we will be layer after layer after layer. So show me your fears, show me your anxieties, and I'll show you a place where the love of the Father needs to have a deeper work. How do I do that, Mark? Well, verse 19. We love him because he first loved us. I got to learn to receive that. I've got to learn to acknowledge, God, do you love me? I accept. I say yes to that love. I'm going to live from that place of love. Otherwise, we get lost in torment, because it says in verse 18, fear involves torment. That word can also be translated punishment. Many of you have a punishment-based relationship with God. He who fears has not been made perfect in love. So there's your prescription for anxiety disorders of every kind, including OCD, including panic attacks, including generalized anxiety, including phobias. He who fears has not been made perfect in love. And so this is why love and humility are so incredibly important. I humble myself to learn, and I let that love have its work, because love starts to drive out fear. And I practice again, and I realize God's with me. He's got my back. He's a good father. But I had to learn to practice. You're not going to, feel so loved, and then take a step. You're going to take a step and learn to practice what it means to be loved. And remember, it goes back to number one. Love is relational. You can't learn love in a classroom. Although you can learn information and knowledge that can lead to understanding. I'm hoping these videos can help you get understanding, but it's going to take practice in learning how to relate in new ways. So number two is a big one here. Very, very important in our journey. Now, the goal, my journey, I want to encourage in you, but this is important to me. It's biblical and something I hold on to in my life, is the word sobriety. The goal, mental health journey goal, is sobriety. That is a sweet spot of understanding and seeing things the way you need to see them. Sobriety is not just not being drunk. That's what we typically think of. I want to live sober. I want to be sober. We typically, in modern culture, we think, well, you're not high and you're not drunk. While that's valid, there are many things in our life that actually cause us to be drunk and intoxicated. I'll get to that in just a second. Sobriety involves me seeing my life, seeing myself and my life the way that I need to see it. Not in complete denial, but also not drowning in worse than it is. Right? And that's what we often fall into. And many of us, when somebody's drunk in the movies, they'd slap them. Hey, come on. I'm not telling you to slap yourself, but maybe a little bit in a good way, kind of go, hey, wake up, Mark, wake up. Because many of us are lost in patterns that don't allow us to live sober. Sober is calm. Sober is collective. Sober is watching. You're awake, you're aware, and you're armed. You're not panicking, you're not in fear, but you're awake to what's needed. You're not lost in condemnation and accusation, although that's one of our battles. One of the greatest battles over believers is the accuser of the brethren, who accuses us day and night. And so most of your spiritual battles are fear and accusation, hitting you all day long, getting you out of your confidence, getting you out of the strength that you have. Now, there's two enemies I want to bring out. And you could write in the comments, which one do you find yourself falling into, or do you find yourself falling into both? These are two areas that we get drunk with. One is striving and spiraling. A lot of energy and effort. There's a lot of anxiousness in this. The striving, I got to make it happen, A lot of spiritual warfare teaching has so much striving in it. It's exhausting. Just go watch some of their content. Go to some of their conferences. You walk out of there and you need a nap for 3 days, right? The striving gets me away from being aware of God's grace. It takes my focus and attention away from God's grace, his empowerment that's at work in my life. And the striving, we often get lost in spiraling. When I spiral, I get drunk with overwhelm. And what I need nurture to recalibrate my heart, to take a deep breath and go, okay, one step at a time. It's okay that I'm not okay right now. I'm going through some things, and I'm going to walk one step at a time through this, right? Because in this, we lose our sobriety to see the battle, to see that we're important, but we're also not so super important. You get it? That's something I hold to in my sobriety, is that I got to be aware of the battle that says I'm not important and nothing matters. But I also need to be aware of the pressure that comes on me, like I'm super important, that responsible thing. Like, oh, if something happens to me, like I'll, like if I have a broadcast, and I've had all kinds of technical issues, and the technical issues, they overwhelm me. Oh my goodness, if this broadcast doesn't get out, there's a spiritual warfare over this broadcast. And sometimes I go, it's all right, Mark, calm down. You're okay. You're not sober right now. You're drunk with over responsibility. Right. And so we're in these getting out of these ditches of battling. Forget it. My life's not important. Many of you need to wake up to that. Your life matters. And people around you, your journey is a blessing to them, and your life matters. But also not getting lost in some of the self-importance of what we need, our ministries, and the whole world needs those kind of things that we can get lost into. So in striving, my attention gets away from grace. In spiraling, I get disconnected from nurture, right? The second area is 3 different areas that go under this. They're all relate, though, is avoidance, passivity, and checking out. You can notice passivity in homes because you can see many men battle this. They battle with spiritual passivity in their household. It's a major battle. A lot of that comes to lack of equipping, and they're scared and they're afraid, so they take a passive route, hoping the problems will just go away. God, rescue me. Oh, God, or somebody else take care of it, right? The avoidance, which many in anxiety and OCD can be very avoidant. We're afraid of our thoughts. We avoid them. We hide from them, right? And we have to learn to step up and face our fears and walk through them, knowing that God is walking with us. And then there's the checking out or the numbing out that we go into. And this often gets into our addictions. It gets into the areas where we're numbing out the pain because we feel we cannot take the threshold of what's hitting us. And this is where we have to get back into sobriety to be alert, to be in a place where you get back in your zone of relationship. Sobriety helps keep you relational. If you want to know, am I living sober? You're awake relationally. You're awake to the people around you, those in your family, those that if you're a wife or a husband, your spouse, when I talk of family, your husband and wives, parents to their children, and then those that you are shepherding or looking out for in friendships and relationships that you're seeking to be a blessing to. You see things relationally, soberly. You're aware. So you go throughout your day and you think of a friend. You go, you know what? Let me take a moment, just say a prayer for them, pray a blessing. You know what? Let me send a note to them. Not hyper-responsible, just flowing because you're awake and you're sober. I could do a whole talk on just that. But sobriety has been a blessing to me because I don't want to run and hide from my pain. I don't want to run and numb out from things I'm facing. I want to feel it, grow through it. And then when you feel like, I can't take it anymore, that's a place of learning to be stretched and develop our muscles at a new level. And that's often what's being revealed in our spiritual battles is we're needing development of our spiritual muscles because they've just not been utilized, and we're needing to be stretched. Now, the fourth thing I want to bring out is a reminder that God's not trying to torment you. It's very helpful for me in 2 Timothy 1:7 to be reminded God's not giving you the spirit of fear. It's very helpful as a reminder that there is no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. it is a very, very helpful reminder. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. Many Christians associate what they're going through in their life as though God is authoring it, as though God is constantly working against you, as though God is out to get you, as though God is irritated with you, as though God is just putting all this pain on you. No, we're in a storm. We're in a battle. There is an enemy. God's not your enemy. We do have an enemy, and we're in a battlefield. Jesus is not authoring these attacks and these tormenting thoughts. Jesus is the author and finisher of your faith. And so many times in our battlegrounds, right, we kind of we get confused of who God is in the midst of it. We need to get ourselves anchored into who God is as a father. That it's not God is causing these battles or causing these oppressive things or these battles you have in your thoughts. But he wants to walk through this with you so you actually learn to overcome. That's what a good father does, by the way. Because God's developing maturity in us as sons and daughters, adult sons and daughters in the faith. And when you're an adult son or daughter, you have to learn how to face those things. A father, if I step into if my daughter's an adult, into her 30-year-old, life and try to step in and run it for her, I'm not actually being a good father, but my job is to equip her. God, your father's a loving father, equipping you to be able to step into what you need to step into. Psalm 23 says he sets a table before us in the presence of our enemies. So the journey is God is walking with you in it. He's not going to just take it all off of you. He's going to be there with you so you learn to overcome. The journey of overcoming is a much more healthy perspective when it comes to spiritual warfare, deliverance, and those kind of subjects. Now, in our battles, what do? We get lost in God, where are you? When we're in the heat of our struggles, the disconnect we've been struggling with gets magnified. And it's a signal this is an area that needs healing in my life. And part of that is learning to walk through our fears. Every single one of us have layers and layers and layers of fears. Anxiety, panic, worry, obsession, stress, distress, despair, all these areas that we're needing healing in. And they're layer by layer. So there are fears I'm facing today I didn't have to face 10 years ago, but I'm facing them today. I'm much more well-equipped. Now, I'm not in constant anxiety that I used to be in, constant 24/7 in a place of obsessive-compulsive drowning. No, but I still have things that make me anxious, that cause worry, that create those kind of emotional responses. And I have tools now to learn to work through them and navigate them so that they don't completely derail me and get me out of sobriety in that place of spiraling and spinning and that place of just, God, where are you in all of this? Number 6. These, again, I'm giving you 10 things I think are helpful and have been very helpful for me. It's not about what thoughts show up, right? We often get lost in the thought content that hit us. Right? And we can become very compulsive. We argue back, we fight back, and all these things. It's not about what thoughts show up, but it's learning a new response that helps me to overcome. In my book, The OCD Healing Journey, I talk about a new battle response that you need to learn in how you process your thoughts. But we often get lost in the thought content. We get lost in, oh my goodness, this thought came from me. We get lost in, because this thought showed up, it means something about me that I need to pay attention to. And realizing these thoughts are not you. These thoughts are not from God, that he's trying to use fear to shake you. He's trying to shake you with fear to get your attention, or the God's accusing you. We get lost in those two, thoughts that get twisted. And many believers in their mental health, if you bring out what they associate with God, this is what God is saying, you often see distortions that are there. And so relearning how we relate to God, but relearning how we relate to thoughts, where I no longer am afraid of my thoughts, that takes practice. Where I'm no longer responding with hyper reactivity, where I'm no longer chasing down thoughts, and I'm no longer living in ruminating, which is which is worry on steroids, just kind of spinning and spinning and spinning over a thought. And Jesus talked about this. So don't let that be your guide. We have to, and I have, content and material that talks about that. But it's learning a new battle response. And we often, when the thoughts rise up, we get geared up and stirred up in a way, and we get in this striving. And what God's wanting us to do is to learn through practice. I'm not going to feed. You may feel anxiety. You don't have to feed it. You may feel constant toxic guilt and shame. You don't have to feed it. You may feel deep depression or discouragement or despondency, but you don't have to feed it. Now, if you'll humble yourself for the learning and see things through love, you're going to open the doorway for the learning that you're needing, for your healing, for your overcoming. Now, number 7, you're going to have to always remember this. People are not your enemy. Now, you're going to be led to think that, but let me remind you of Paul's exhortation. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. That means your mother-in-law. That means your parents. That means your siblings. It means that person that hurt you, the person that betrayed you. They're not your enemy. Now, here's the deal. All healing is relational. All mental health is relational. All of our mental health struggles have ties to relational hurt, pain, and struggle, right? Because God wired us relationally. And when you were born, you did not have relational faculties just intact, right? As far as like how to think or how to see yourself, we come into this world needing to learn everything. In fact, if you take a baby and just leave it alone, that baby will die. It's not going to survive and figure it out. And so what we learn in our journey often comes out of relational brokenness. And God is in a work of healing that. He's a good father, sent his son to demonstrate love, to build us up in faith, hope, and love, the truth that sets us free. But we have to realize, okay, God uses people as vessels relationally to help us. But we also have to understand the enemy will use people to relationally erode mental health. And this is the healing process that God is opening up. And this takes time and it takes a journey. That's why all healing is relational. All healing is process that we need to understand. Number 8, let kindness and patience be experienced in all things. This has been a daily reminder for me. Let all things be immersed in kindness, immersed in patience, in how I relate to myself, in how I relate to God, in how I relate to other people. Now, when battles intensify, what happens? We get impatient and we get irritable. We get sharp with our tone, right? We get curt. We get rude. We get sharp in how we come across to people. And especially what happens is you can do that towards those who are closest to you in your relationship, right? Even in the worst of times, we can kind of hold it together with like the public at large. But those closest to us, we just kind of get more snappy. And always recalibrate yourself. Kindness and patience. Love is patient. Love is kind. The kindness of God is beautiful because it leads you, the goodness and kindness of God leads you to repentance, meaning that in his goodness, as I taste of it, it allows me to see thought patterns in my life that I go, I don't want that anymore. I'm turning from that way of thinking about God. Mine was that, God was trying to make me afraid and he was using all these thoughts. And when I was able to experience his goodness, it's like, I'm turning from that. No, that's not who God is. And then the patience that we develop helps build our resilience. James reminds us, let patience have its perfect work. So when the trials hit, when stuff hits in your life, count it all joy, which that to me is really the toughest scripture in the Bible. You have your toughest ones. I think that one's the toughest one. Count it all joy, that when a trial hits, joy happens. You get excited. But there's a patience that's needing to be developed in there. And so, which we can have joy in this battle. Wow, it's available. Let that rest on your mental health. The joy is available. Now, if you're looking to just get free from everything so you can just be fixed or whatever that means, joy is going to be stolen. Joy is relational, and relationship is journey. And so if you allow journey, you're going to see signs of welcoming joy where you can dance in the midst of a struggle, where you can smile in the midst of some pain, and you can laugh in the midst of the journey being difficult and being challenging. Now, number 9, and this is a mindset I continually have day in and day out. Let your storms be a place where you welcome healing and maturing. Our battles, they awaken us. Now, we want God to rescue us from the storm, God get rid of the storm, or we get lost in the why. Many spiritual warfare people get lost in the why. They're trying to figure out why this happened so that they can shut it down and get totally free instead of going, I'm going to walk through this. And God you're not trying to torment me. You're not trying to kill me. You're not trying to confuse me. But I welcome the learning, humility and love. God, you love me, and I welcome the learning that's here. Now, when your mental health battlegrounds are really tough, we go into our story, right? I never get this short, and then nobody loves me. Your story starts to come out. Your disempowered story that needs to be sanctified. For many of us, our story needs to be sanctified. It needs to be cleansed because it's filled with toxicity. It's filled with things we latch onto. I'm all alone. Nothing ever works for me. These are things that come up. We go to our beliefs. We go to our perspectives. Many go into their compulsions. They go into compulsivity to try. I got to be better for God. I got to be better for God, or else he's gonna what? Right? And so I find over and over again, the storms become new opportunities of renewal in my journey as I heal, as I mature. Last thing I want to remind you of is very helpful for spiritual warfare and mental health. Yes, we're in a battle. The battle's over our minds, but don't focus on like fixing your mind. Let your focus be on the heart, because the heart's relational, and heart changes how we think. You hit when the area of the heart gets hit in a good way, it trickles into thousands of areas in the mind. So just keep showing up and keep learning in a journey. And I give that as number 10 because it's so incredibly important to have a journey mindset. Now, there are 4 things I keep in mind as I look at the radar of what I focus on. And I'm going to give them to you in closing. These are my personal focuses, and they're all biblically based. You can all go look them up and take them in on their own. The first one is faith, hope, and love. Paul said these 3 remain in all things, but the greatest is love. So it starts with love. How do I build my faith? It starts with love. And as you connect more to love, it builds your hope. Your hope is your expectation, how you see life, how you look around, how you see yourself, how you see God, how you see your journey. That's your hope. If you tell me how your life is going, you're telling me the hope that you're living by. Faith is the substance of that. So faith takes what you're seeing and acts on it, or doesn't act on it. So if your hope is whatever, it's pointless, my life is meaningless, well, faith is going to grab that and go, well, I guess I'm not doing anything today, right? So I want to build those 3 in my life. I want to pay attention to power, love, and a sound mind. That sound mind also means self-control. So God's wanting to build power in my life. Well, I have to face my fears in order to build power and confidence. It's not just going to come upon me. All of a sudden, I'm just going to act powerful. I've got to actually step into areas that help train me and develop me. And a sound mind, a soundness. I love that word, sound mind. And that's the journey that God's leading us to, that he's wanting to develop soundness in your thinking. Step by step, journey mentality. The truth that sets us free. Why do I say that? Because many of us get confused. Am I listening to truth or not? When a lot of times they're just under condemnation. They can't even see truth. And they think it's maybe truth. And they think they need to pay attention to it, but it leaves them condemned, shamed, because they're under accusation. They're usually under legalistic law that's hitting them and causing them to drown. And lastly, if I was to look at the metrics of spiritual maturity, one of the things I would look at here is what Paul said. It's not my opinion. This is what the Bible says. The fruit of the Spirit. If we want to look at fruit, say, hey, that person's fruit, let's look at the fruit of their life. What I often see when Christians say fruit, we look at ministry performance. We look at achievement, results people have in numbers, or maybe people that they've influenced. When the Bible talks about fruit here, It's all relational. Everything here is relational on this screen. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. That's what I want to embrace today. I want to look for these. I want to look for love and embrace it. I want to look for joy and embrace it. I want to look for peace and embrace it. I want to be long-suffering. I want to be patient, persevering. I want to be kind in all things. I want goodness. As I taste of God's goodness, that I would let that flow into my life, that he's good, and I want that goodness to flow through my life. Faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are all relational. They are learned through life, through practice, through stumbling, fumbling, figuring out your way, because God's grace is patient with us, walking with you in a journey. So let me ask you a question. Which of these stuck out to you today? Don't get overwhelmed by all 10. Maybe you want to come back and revisit this resource. If this was a blessing to your life, please do me a favor, click that like button and subscribe, but also consider a one-time donation or become a monthly supporter. Get a hold of my books and resources. I've mentioned a number of things. Experiencing God's Love as Your Father, which is a book. A Rejection Mindset, which is a book. There's also training courses available for these as well. You're learning to face your fears. My book, I Will Not Fear. You're learning to relate to yourself in a different way. God loves me, and I love myself. If you want to get an overall sense of a heart-healing journey, that book is available as well, too. You want to learn how to shift your relationship focus and getting toxicity of anger and unforgiveness out of your life. The book Bitter Free is available. And also right now, the OCD Healing Journey is available to help you walk through obsessive and compulsive patterns in your life. As you can see, there are so many resources available. There's a topics page you can go to. And in that, I've indexed and libraried and categorized out things for your help and support. If you want to take a next level and you say, Mark, the way you teach, what you teach about, I'm all about this. I want more of this in my life. I want to encourage you to take part in the Healing and Freedom community. This is a place that you can make an investment in your life, in your journey. There's access to all my training courses. That's all my book material training courses, and then other training courses that I have on there that are available. Number 2, you'll have access to interaction with other people in the community, as well as the ability to ask questions. And then 3, also our Q&A gatherings that we have, where you'll be able to access to questions and interactions in that and be encouraged in your life and in your journey. Well, I pray that you enjoyed this. This is your brother from another mother saying, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. I'll be back with more insights for your healing and freedom journey. But in the meantime, I'm out.